Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources, your stack of articles, research, and notes, and we really just distill them down into the sharpest, most essential nuggets of knowledge. Our mission today is, it's a challenging one. We're doing a deep dive into an economic thesis that is, well, it's profoundly controversial, and it likely runs counter to every single piece of financial advice you have ever received.
I think that's a safe bet.
We are dissecting the core argument presented in the sources related to something called the wealth trap, why saving is losing. And, let's not bury the lead here. The entire philosophy, it's all encapsulated in this one very provocative statement.
Why saving money is actually keeping you poor.
Exactly.
It's designed to stop you in your tracks, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when we talk about sacred cows in finance, saving money is maybe the biggest one of all.
Oh, absolutely.
We are conditioned, culturally, historically, to see thrift and discipline building that nest egg. We see it as the ultimate financial responsibility.
It's what our parents taught us. It's what their parents taught them.
Exactly. So for a thesis to come along and suggest that this very discipline isn't just, say, suboptimal, but that it's actively detrimental to building long-term wealth,
Right.
well, that demands a really serious analysis.
It really does. The shock factor is just massive. And I think it's because it attacks a bedrock habit, something ingrained from childhood. The simple act of filling up the piggy bank.
Right.
If you're a diligent person, if you feel like you're doing everything right by setting money aside month after month, and yet you're not getting ahead, you're not feeling wealthier, this thesis promises to validate that frustration. It's basically saying, hey, the mechanism is flawed, not your effort.
And that's really the power of the contrarian belief. It hints that there's some kind of hidden truth, an insight that the majority is just missing. It's why it becomes so viral in the context of financial thinking.
A secret language, almost.
In a way, yeah. So our commitment here, and this is important, is critical analysis. We're not here to endorse a specific investment plan or tell you what to do. What we are going to do is meticulously unpack the specific mechanical and economic reasons presented in the source material for why traditional savings, as they're defined in this context, are failing the modern wealth builder.
Okay, so we're basically taking apart the clockwork of this supposed trap. The sources are extremely clear that this wealth trap is reinforced by two relentless, silent and systemic forces.
Relentless is the right word.
The first is the corrosive effect of inflation, a force you see on every grocery bill, every gas station sign. And the second, which is often more insidious because it's a loss you never actually see on a statement, is opportunity cost. So let's unpack the groundwork that makes these two forces just so destructive to the traditional saver. So the sources don't just critique current financial habits, they're really demanding a total philosophical reset. And the starting point is this pretty radical premise. Everything you were taught about money is backwards. I mean, that's not just hyperbole to sell a book, is it? This has to relate to a massive fundamental shift in our economic reality since, the 1950s or something.
It absolutely implies that. You're spot on. To understand why this foundational societal habit of, putting money in a savings account is considered fundamentally incorrect today, you really do have to look at the historical context.
Yeah.
For millennia, storing value, whether it was gold or silver or even commodity-backed currency, that was a solid, totally rational defense mechanism. The dollar you put in a mattress in, say, 1900 had a relatively stable purchasing power over decades.
Because it was tied to something real, something tangible.
Precisely. It was tied to a tangible asset. That was the conventional wisdom, and for a very long time, it worked.
But that world it's just gone. We are in a completely different system now, a fiat currency system.
That's the key. We shifted away from those commodity-backed systems. The big famous moment was 1971 with the abandonment of the Bretton Woods system. In a fiat system, the value of a currency is backed by government trust and policy, not by a pile of gold in a vault somewhere.
Right.
And crucially, modern central banks, like the Federal Reserve here in the U.S., they're often mandated to encourage a certain level of inflation. Their goal is to keep the economy moving, to avoid these catastrophic deflationary spirals.
So they actually want the money to be worth a little less next year.
Yes, that's part of the design. So the defensive act of storing currency has, as this thesis posits, become an offensive vulnerability. The system is now structurally designed to erode the value of stored currency over time. It's a feature, not a bug.
Wow. So the very foundation of financial common sense, save for a rainy day, is fundamentally incorrect for an environment that is structurally designed to penalize non-productive cash.
That's the argument.
So if saving just means storing money in these highly liquid, practically zero yield accounts, then relying solely on that mechanism guarantees you lose ground.
That is the philosophical core of the wealth trap. Saving is intended to provide safety and security. And that's a necessary function. Absolutely, nobody's denying that.
For emergencies, sure.
For emergencies. But in this framework, it's the mechanism that ensures the saver remains stuck, or even worse, slips backward, relative to their potential for wealth accumulation. It creates a psychological lull, a sort of comfort. You see the number in your bank account going up every month.
Right, which feels good. It provides constant positive reinforcement.
It does. But the value of that number, its actual purchasing power, is silently shrinking. It's an illusion that's masking the reality of wealth erosion.
And that's what makes this contrarian belief so compelling, I think. It validates that feeling that so many diligent savers experience. That feeling of, I work hard, I live below my means, I save every single month, but I never feel like I'm truly getting ahead.
The aha moment for the listener, according to these sources, resides in shifting the blame. It's not about a personal failing or a lack of discipline. It's about the structure of the vehicle you've chosen for your long-term capital.
The vehicle, not the driver.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The traditional safety net, that low-yield savings account, is built on eroding ground in an economy that is powered by inflation and by growth mandates. So if you're struggling, the thesis asks you to look at the structure of your savings, not at the size of your contributions.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
The goal then isn't just to challenge the idea of saving in general, but to clearly delineate the difference between storage and deployment. Because storage is where the trap really resides.
That's the whole game.
And the first mechanism making that storage so destructive is this relentless, quiet thing called inflation. Okay, so let's dive deep into that first force working against the traditional safer inflation. The sources give us this really phenomenal visual analogy to start with. They ask you to visualize the bank vault filling with dust.
It's a powerful conceptual starting point, isn't it? Because inflation is so hard to grasp emotionally. It's abstract for most people. We tend to think of our money as static, as immutable.
Like a number carved in stone.
Exactly. When you put $1,000 in a safe, you expect to retrieve $1,000. But this dust analogy forces you to see that the currency isn't just being preserved, it's actively deteriorating. The dust represents the loss of purchasing power. It's this pervasive, unseen force that is, frankly, guaranteed by the modern economic system.
And this is where we have to be really specific about what inflation actually is. It's not just, prices are going up. It's the systematic reduction of what your currency can command in the real world. The numbers on your account statement stay the same, or maybe they go up by some tiny little interest rate, but what you can actually buy with that money is systematically, deliberately diminishing.
And as we touched on, it happens by design. If the central bank targets 2 or 3% inflation, they are essentially broadcasting, we want your money to be worth 2 to 3% less next year.
Why? Why do they want that?
Because that encourages you to spend it and invest it now.
Yeah.
It gets money moving. This active erosion is necessary to avoid the alternative, which is deflation. And deflation is just catastrophic for debtors and for overall economic activity. So the moment you decide to store your money in a vehicle that earns less than that mandated inflation rate, you have guaranteed yourself a loss of real wealth.
Wow. The loss is guaranteed. That's a powerful statement. But the problem is, it's a slow motion catastrophe, right? Most people don't feel 2% erosion in a single month.
Exactly. And that slow decay is precisely why this force is so insidious. The sources use another image for this, the piggy bank slowly cracking. It signifies the hidden, non-acute nature of the loss.
I like that.
Think about it. If your bank balance just dropped by 5% overnight, you'd panic. You'd pull the money out, you'd call the bank, you'd demand action. But when that piggy bank develops these tiny, invisible microfractures over 5, 10, 20 years, allowing the value to just leak out invisibly, you only perceive the accumulated loss when you finally go to use the money for a significant goal.
Like retirement or a house down payment or college for your kids.
Precisely. And then suddenly you realize, wait, the money I saved isn't nearly enough.
It's really the difference between an immediate traumatic injury and a slow chronic illness. One demands immediate attention, right? The other is so easy to overlook and dismiss until the damage is critical.
That's a great way to put it.
If inflation quietly steals $200 from your purchasing power this year, you probably just chalk it up to high prices. But if a burglar came into your house and stole $200 cash, you'd call the police and change the locks.
And this psychological phenomenon is what economists call money illusion, because your nominal balance, that's the numerical figure in your savings account, is going up. Because you're adding to it, you feel financially responsible, you feel wealthier.
You're getting that positive feedback loop?
You are. You're mistaking a positive numerical change for actual wealth creation, and you're failing to adjust for the loss of purchasing power. This illusion is what keeps people trapped on what the sources call the broken rung of the ladder.
Okay, let's make this really concrete with some numbers, because I think the listener needs to understand the cumulative impact of that slow crack. So let's take a traditional savings path. Assume you diligently save $10,000 today. And for the next 20 years, you just let it sit. You put it on a high street savings account earning, let's be generous, maybe 0.5% interest.
Okay, a generous 0.5%. Let's assume a pretty conservative long-term inflation rate, maybe 3%, which is often the target anyway.
Right.
So that $10,000 principal, after 20 years, will have grown nominally to about $11,048. That looks okay on a statement, right?
It looks like a win. You earned over $1,000 for doing nothing.
It feels like a win. But if we run that same $10,000 through the inflation calculator at 3% over those same 20 years, the cost of goods and services will have increased to a point where you would now need $18,061 to buy what $10,000 bought you at the start.
Oh, wow. Okay. So your $11,000, it actually only has the purchasing power of roughly $6,100 in today's money. Is that right?
That's exactly right. You spent 2 decades accumulating a small nominal gain, only to realize that in real terms, you have suffered a loss of nearly 40% of your starting purchasing power.
40%.
The dust has filled the vault, and the crack has caused a massive structural failure. That is the fundamental mathematical reason why saving, in this specific context, is losing. It's a guaranteed loss of real wealth over any significant time horizon.
And the sources emphasize that the problem isn't just this generalized inflation, right? The kind measured by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which tracks a basket of common goods. For the listener, the inflation that really matters most is the cost of the big-ticket items, the things you're actually saving for.
That is such a critical distinction. Your personal inflation rate, if you're saving for college tuition or healthcare or a down payment on a house in a competitive market, that rate is likely far, far higher than the generalized 2 to 3% CPI target.
Because those things aren't in the basket of goods in the same way.
Exactly. Those specific items, the real markers of long-term financial stability, they often inflate at 5%, 7%, or sometimes even higher year after year.
Which brings us directly to this other concept from the sources, the clock racing ahead of savings. If those major life goals are the clock, and they're accelerating at 7% per year, while your savings are just creeping along at 0.5%, the distance between you and your goal just widens exponentially.
The structural deficiencies look bare right there. Time becomes your enemy. Every single month that your money sits dormant in one of those low-yield accounts, the cost of your future goals accelerates further and further out of reach.
It's a losing race.
It is. The problem is not your lack of discipline. It's the structural inadequacy of the vehicle. You're trying to run a race where your speed, your 0.5% return, is inherently slower than the acceleration of the finish line, which is the 7% inflation on tuition or housing.
And that, I think, is the most profound realization for the listener here. That frustration isn't imaginary. It's not in your head. It is a direct consequence of a system designed to penalize capital storage.
Right.
So the only way to win that race is to match the velocity of your own growth to the acceleration of your costs. And that means you have to move beyond simple storage.
Absolutely. The money is losing real value to an external structural force. But that loss is actually compounded by an internal failure, the failure to generate its own growth potential. And that leads us perfectly into the second pillar of this wealth trap, the cost of inaction.
Okay, so if inflation is the dust that's eroding the vault from the outside, then opportunity cost is the failure of the money inside to even fight back.
Well said.
It's the silent killer, isn't it? It's so often overlooked because it's not an actual expense you see deducted from your account. It's a loss of potential. It's a hypothetical expense based on a choice you made. So just to define it simply, opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative that you give up. In this thesis, the choice to save money traditionally, keeping it super liquid and low yield, means you are giving up potential growth. That failure to generate its maximum potential is defined here as an active loss.
Right. And to visualize this, the sources use another fantastic metaphor, the image of money asleep on a couch.
I love this one.
It's so good because it's so clear. The money is resting, it's passive, it is entirely non-productive. And the fundamental critique here is that wealth creation is an active process. Capital must be deployed. It must be working, generating returns, compounding, multiplying. It can't just exist.
I think this is such a powerful psychological tool because it personifies the money. It makes you realize that your capital is a tool that requires utilization. When it's just sitting on the couch, it's not helping you build your house. It's just taking up space.
Right.
You need your money to be awake. It needs to be out there generating returns, acting as a passive income generator for you.
The contrast is just so stark when you think about it. Money that is asleep, that's your stored capital. It only grows when you manually add to it. You have to use your labor income, your active effort, to increase that balance.
You're pushing the boulder up the hill yourself.
Exactly. But money that is awake, invested capital, it grows through capital appreciation and compounding returns. It makes your existing money do the work for you. The difference in the long term is staggering, and that difference is the opportunity cost.
Okay, let's delve into the mathematical scale of this loss, because opportunity cost isn't a straight line, it's exponential. This is the part that I think often blows people's minds.
It really needs to be emphasized. So let's use that same $10,000 again, and let's compare two scenarios over, say, 30 years.
Okay.
Scenario A, you save it in that 0.5% account we talked about. Scenario B, you deploy it into a diversified investment vehicle, something that achieves a modest historical return of 7%. And let's ignore inflation for a second, just to isolate the growth potential.
Got it. So in scenario A, after 30 years, that $10,000 would grow to roughly $11,615, a small, guaranteed, nominal return.
Right. Safe, predictable. Now in scenario B, compounded at 7%, that same $10,000 becomes approximately $76,123.
Wow.
The difference over $64,000, that is the active loss of potential. That is the quantifiable price of keeping your money asleep on the couch for 30 years.
It's the growth you forfeited.
It's the forfeited growth, yes. And because of compounding, you aren't just forfeiting this year's 7% return, you're forfeiting the return on that return every single year for 30 years. It's a snowball effect.
That is the ultimate penalty of inactivity. You're essentially trading a tiny guaranteed return right now for a massive potential future return. But this brings up the critical question that I know the listener is asking right now. What about risk?
Of course.
I can guarantee that $11,600 in the savings account. I can't guarantee $76,000 in the market. If I shift from saving to deployment, aren't I risking the total loss of my capital, which is obviously worse than just some slow erosion?
That is the necessary and intelligent pushback.
Yeah.
And the thesis absolutely acknowledges that fear, the fear of market volatility and the desire for zero risk to your principal. That's what drives the traditional saving mindset. Liquidity and safety are prioritized above absolutely everything else.
As they should be, for some money.
For some money, yes. But the central argument of the wealth trap is that in our modern inflationary economy, choosing zero risk to your principal means guaranteeing a real loss of purchasing power over the long term. You're not avoiding risk, you're just swapping one type for another. You replace the risk of market volatility with the certainty of purchasing power erosion.
So the thesis forces you to view safety itself as a cost. The security you gain, that guarantee of the nominal amount, is vastly outweighed by the opportunity you forfeited. The money is literally too safe to grow.
Exactly. When we talk about keeping the listener poor relative to their potential, this is precisely what we mean. By constantly choosing storage over deployment, you are consciously rejecting the engine of modern wealth creation.
There is compounding capital.
Right. Wealth builders rely on capital appreciation and passive income generated by that active money. Traditional savers are forced to rely solely on their labor income, and that means they have to work harder, for longer, and earn more just to maintain their footing against inflation.
And that contrast between labor income and capital income is so key. Labor income requires your time and your effort. It's finite. Capital income requires zero additional effort from you. It's your deployed money working for you 204/7.
And by allowing money to stay asleep, the traditional saver guarantees their reliance on active labor as their primary wealth engine. The wealthy, by contrast, shift that burden to capital appreciation, which operates completely independently of their time and effort. This is the classic difference between working for your money and having it work for you. Opportunity cost is just the measurement of that missed opportunity to make that vital shift.
And we should be careful here. The thesis isn't saying eliminate all savings, right?
Right.
It's not saying you shouldn't have an emergency fund.
Not at all. That would be irresponsible.
It's saying we need to redefine the function of that money. Emergency funds are essential. That money needs to be liquid, it needs to be on hand, and therefore it should be stored. But the tendency, which the sources criticize, is treating all of your long-term wealth accumulation capital as if it were a short-term emergency fund.
That is the critical nuance. The trap isn't the 3 to 6 month emergency fund. It's the tendency to keep massive amounts of capital on the couch for years or even decades, wasting all that potential compounding. The failure is a failure of utilization. The money is a tool, and by keeping it tucked away in a drawer, you fail to apply it to the task of building wealth. You're only applying it to the task of maintaining liquidity.
Storage versus deployment, it all comes back to that.
It's everything.
Okay, so to summarize these two corrosive mechanisms, inflation is actively reducing the size of your capital pool in real terms, and opportunity cost is preventing that pool from being refilled exponentially by compounding returns. Both of these mechanisms guarantee that the traditional saving path is structurally a losing proposition over the long term. Right, so let's bring these two relentless forces together now. We've got the corrosive dust of inflation, which is eroding the value of your nominal amount, and then you have the money asleep on the couch, forfeiting that exponential compounding that really defines true wealth accumulation. When you combine them, the economic environment isn't neutral, it's actively hostile to money that's just being stored.
The structure of the trap is now painfully clear. If your money is losing real value every single year due to inflation, and at the same time it's forfeiting the potential for significant compounding growth, well, the gap between your current savings and true financial independence just widens every single day.
You're working against both the tide and the clock, as they say.
That's it exactly.
And to visualize the ultimate consequence of this structural failure, the sources give us this other great metaphor. It's the ladder labeled wealth with broken rungs.
I think this one really ties it all together. Society teaches us that traditional saving, that low-yield storage of cash, is the safe, crucial first rung on the ladder to wealth.
Right. You start there, you build up your security, and then, only then, you can move up to investing. You need that solid foundation before you can start to ascend.
That's the story we're all told. But if that first rung is broken, if the very act of saving is losing you real wealth, then trying to ascend from that rung is basically impossible.
You can't climb on a broken step.
You can't. You might feel like you're climbing, but the rung itself is slipping backwards faster than you can step up. It's a foundation that's built on eroding ground. It cannot structurally support the journey to true wealth accumulation.
And this is why I think this message resonates so powerfully with people. It validates that listener's feeling of struggle. It offers a narrative that shifts the focus from, personal fault to systemic design.
Exactly.
And the solution, therefore, is not to just work harder and save more money in the same flawed vehicle. The solution is to recognize the broken rung and then conceptualize a leap over it.
That conceptual leap is everything. It means accepting risk, yes, but also managing that risk and completely redefining what financial security even looks like. It demands an immediate fundamental shift from that storage mindset.
The idea of safety first, always.
Right, from that to a deployment mindset, where the emphasis moves to making your money active and productive almost immediately.
So the implication of really internalizing that saving is losing is that the function of your capital needs to change entirely. You have to start recategorizing your money.
That's a great way to put it. You still have liquid cash for your immediate needs, your true emergency fund. That's still stored. But all other long-term wealth must transition from being passively stored capital to actively deployed income-generating capital.
This means the focus for you, the listener, has to shift entirely. It moves from the size of your balance to the velocity and the yield of your funds. The question changes from how much did I save this month to how quickly can this money be awakened from the couch and put to work, and how high is its return rate compared to my own personal inflation rate.
That's the race against the clock.
That's the race.
It fundamentally changes the criteria for success. Success is no longer measured by the quantity of money in your savings account. It's measured by the quality and the productivity of your deployed capital. It's a move from a measure of sheer volume to a measure of efficiency and exponential growth potential.
So if the rung is broken, the only option is deployment. The genius of this contrarian approach is that it makes investment or deployment, whatever you want to call it, not some advanced tactic for the rich, but the necessary starting point for everyone.
Yes, you have to skip the broken rung.
You skip the broken rung because the goal isn't to accumulate nominal dollars. The goal is to accumulate real, functional purchasing power and compounding potential.
And that frame of mind is what helps the listener overcome that sense of being overwhelmed, that information overload. The sources really distill all this complexity down into two clear forces, inflation and opportunity cost, which provide clear directions for conceptual change.
It's intuitive.
It becomes intuitive. If the dust is filling the vault, you have to put the money somewhere the dust cannot settle. If the money is asleep on the couch, you must make it active and productive. The failure of traditional saving is now, hopefully, clear.
I think the most important takeaway from this whole synthesis section is the psychological liberation it offers people. By labeling the traditional path as the trap and the broken rung, it removes the blame and the shame that's so often associated with struggling to get ahead.
Absolutely.
It validates that feeling that the environment itself was stacked against you. The struggle wasn't a flaw in your effort, but a flaw in your structural understanding of the system.
That's it. The moment the listener accepts that the fundamental premise they operated under, that saving is the ultimate virtue, is simply wrong. In our current economic structure, they gain clarity, they gain direction, they realize they must find a way to make their capital productive, not merely safe.
This has been a necessary and, I hope, a liberating deep dive into the wealth trap. If you've experienced that jolt of recognition, that sudden clarity about why your diligent saving hasn't led to the wealth you expected, then I think we've accomplished our mission of providing a rapid, thorough analysis of this source material. So let's quickly summarize the 3 core takeaways derived directly from this contrarian thesis. These are the 3 mental shortcuts you can carry with you. First is that provocative belief that everything you were taught about money might be backwards. It fundamentally challenges the sacred habit of saving as an effective tool for long-term wealth accumulation in an inflationary fiat economy.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Second, it's that visceral understanding that inflation is the silent, insidious dust slowly filling the vault. It's eroding your purchasing power over time, guaranteeing a real loss when your money is just stored in low-yield accounts. Remember, the clock is always racing ahead of your savings. And third, it's the critical realization that opportunity cost is the money asleep on the couch. It's you forfeiting exponential compounding returns, which is the quantifiable price of inaction and the primary mechanism keeping you behind your true potential.
We analyzed why that ladder to wealth is broken rungs. It's because the traditional safety vehicle is structurally inadequate for the job. And the only path forward, according to this thesis, is a radical shift in mindset, from a focus on storage and liquidity to a focus on deployment and growth velocity.
A completely different way of thinking.
A completely different way of thinking. And this leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on and to explore beyond this deep dive. If the environment of modern economics actively plenishes capital storage and demands deployment, then the characteristics of successful wealth vehicles must be precisely engineered to counter inflation and maximize compounding. So the question is this: what exact characteristics must an asset possess to qualify as truly awake money, money that can both outrun the clock and effectively repair those broken rungs in the wealth ladder?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the wealth trap. We really hope this analysis gives you the clarity to look at your financial habits not just with discipline, but with a critical new perspective on the forces that are silently working against you. We'll see you next time.